So, first off, what we're talking about today is DAOstack's open source ecosystem. We'll be just kind of walking through the stack and also some of the emergent projects that have come from other groups in the ecosystem that are working on things. Because again, the whole point is to try and create this resistant network that's developing this protocol in, an autonomous distributed way. Let me just go ahead and actually start the timer so I don't run over. And then also, these slides are available at the QR code, so feel free to not take pictures. And you can just snap a picture of the QR code. And so, sorry, one sec. So first off, who am I? Hello world. My name is Jordan Ellis. I go by dOrg Jelly on all the different things. I work with dOrg. dOrg is a DAO. We are a collective of freelancers. The idea is to basically be able to gain the benefits of being a freelancer, namely sovereignty, but then also be able to gain the benefits of being with a collective, being able to have the support of others and knowledge share and things like that. And so dOrg has been around for around 6 months, and I'm happy to say that I've been paying myself through a DAO for 6 months, which is fucking cool. Woo! And then also we have a website here, and so feel free to check it out. You can, try and hire us if you want us to work on a project, and then also you can try and join us if you want to, work with us and be a part of the collective. And so let's go ahead and walk through this stack. So first off, this is how it looks in kind of this diagrammatic form. At the bottom here are the contract levels. We have infra, which is the base layer of the protocol, and we'll talk more about all of these. Arc, which is the implementation of the DAO protocol. ArcJS and ArcDB, which is the caching layer and the client SDK. And then also we have the dApps that are built on top of these two, and then the DAOs that are a manifestation of all of our dreams. And so let's go ahead and jump into the contracts layer. So first off with infra, this is actually a governance protocol agnostic layer. So this layer is intended to be used with any other contract out there. Like for instance, you could use this with Aragon. And so first off, we have voting machines. We have the Genesis protocol, which implements holographic consensus. We'll talk more about that in a second. We have absolute vote and quorum vote, pretty standard. And then we also have a reputation token, which is a non-transferable reputation token that's currently being used within all of the DAOstack DAOs. And then here is an example of Genesis protocol. I'm not going to go into this as a deep dive. Just wanted to give you an idea of what this looks like in a visual form. Basically, what Genesis protocol does is it attaches a prediction market onto the side of a list of proposals so that you can, as a bystander, you don't need to have reputation in this DAO. You don't need to be able to vote on these things. You can still stake, and you can say, I think that this proposal will pass, or I think that it will fail. And you actually have an economic incentive to guess correctly based on what you think the body of voters will end up doing. And so here's an example. At the top, we have boosted proposals. At the bottom, we have regular proposals. When you stake on them, the stake shows up here. And so this one has 9,000 gens staked. It's going to actually have a shorter time to completion of the vote. And then additionally, it passes with a relative majority. So even if 12% of the total members vote on it, it will still pass within this time. Whereas down here, if it's unboosted, it actually takes the full quorum, which by default is 50%. So if it's unboosted, it requires 50% of your reputation holders to vote and then actually be able to get 50% majority on the passing side. So this is Arc. And so Arc is the implementation of the DAO protocol. It's broken apart into these different parts. Let's go ahead and talk about these first, because these are kind of like your public-facing entities of the protocol. So first off is the avatar. The avatar is kind of like the public address of your DAO. This is where you will actually take payments, right down here. So it acts as a wallet. And then also, if you wanted to own different things, the avatar's address will own it. So in the case of the DAO's avatar owns the Dutch X exchange. And so if the voters, vote to change, let's say, the fee in the Dutch X, the avatar will make a generic call to the Dutch X and change that fee. And it looks like message.sender is the avatar. And so that's the avatar. We also have the reputation token and the DAO token. The DAO token is just a regular ERC20. You don't have to use it if you don't want to, but if you wanted to assign some additional utility to the DAO token, you could go ahead and do so. And then minting of all of these is controlled through the controller, which can only be invoked through a passing proposal. So we'll talk about that in a second too. So the controller is kind of like the motherboard for your DAO. This is what everything hooks into. And what is everything hooking into it? We have schemes and constraints. And so schemes you can think of as features for your DAO. A scheme may be do this generic call on the blockchain, like for instance, change the fee in the DutchX, or it may be distribute this amount of ETH to this contributor for X and Y reasons. And then lastly, we have constraints. And so constraints basically allow you to have a global scope at being able to constrain what happens inside of your DAO. Like for instance, I don't want to distribute more than 5 Ether as kind of like a safety precaution. And so you can go ahead and implement that within a constraint. Here's just another look at it, so it's a little larger. Again, schemes get attached to the controller. You create proposals here. They're hooked up to a voting machine, and so like for this scheme, which may be the contribution reward scheme, we create a proposal. It gets voted on through the Genesis protocol. If that passes, it will execute through the controller, which will do, let's say, calling into the wallet and distributing funds to, Sam for her awesome achievements. And so now the 3 fundamental schemes for a minimum viable DAO. First off is the contribution reward scheme. This is pretty much what I had just talked about. Being able to distribute rep and any type of token that the DAO holds, whether it be its own ERC20 or any other ERC20 that it has possession of. It can distribute that to any other address. A generic scheme, this allows you to call any contract on the blockchain, any method with any arguments. And so this allows for extremely dynamic behavior. And then the scheme registrar. This one's really cool because this allows your DAO to be future-proof. It allows your DAO to modify itself, both through adding new schemes, removing schemes, and then also modifying how schemes are set up. So let's say you wanted to change the voting configuration for your contributor reward scheme, make it faster because it takes too long to pay people. You can use this scheme to be able to modify that configuration. And so we'll, again, talk more about that. Configurable scheme. So with schemes, we have parameters and voting configurations. And so parameters are specific to the scheme. So a great example of a parameter is with the generic scheme. We have the parameter of the contract that it will call. And so again, in the case of the DX DAO, this contract address is the DutchX. And then we have the voting configuration. So each scheme can be configured to have different voting configurations. So this is really nice because in the case of the scheme registrar, where we're modifying how our DAO actually functions, we want this to be critical as far as its resilience goes. And so we want this proposal time to be very long. We want, the DAO to downstake a lot so that it takes a lot to boost these proposals. And then we may even want to up the majority to like 66% or something like that instead of the regular 50 for unboosted proposals. And then, you can configure the others in any way you choose. Cool, so now let's get to deployment because we've talked about the contracts, but how do you actually get this stuff onto the chain and deploy your DAOs, or let's say you wanted to fork Arc and deploy your own version of Arc. And so this is through the migration repo. So the migration repository is a toolkit of scripts that allow you to deploy the protocol. So again, you could deploy all of the new universal contracts. And then you could also create a new DAO using an existing deployment. So saying, I want to create a new DAO targeting version 18 of the Arc protocol. And then, it can be used as a CLI from the command line. It can be used as a JavaScript module so that you can integrate it into your apps. And then also, it has a Docker image with pre-deployed DAOs. So this is really nice if you just wanted to build a front end, have a test environment. You can download a pre-migrated Docker image, and then you can go ahead and test against that. And so there's actually a few projects that we'll talk about that have examples of this. So if you want to build your own app, you can reference those. Alchemy and Dow Components both do this. And then so now talking about the caching layer. So for the caching, we use the graph protocol. The main problem that's being solved here is the reading of a ton of history of event data. And so this takes forever. The first version of Alchemy didn't have a caching layer because it wanted to be completely decentralized and there weren't any good options that existed, and it wasn't even a relevant problem because maybe it'll be fast enough. Spoiler alert, it wasn't fast enough. It took forever. And so this is really a quality of life thing because when you have a long history of proposals and data and votes and all of this stuff happening on chain, you need to be able to read it quickly and display it in your app and not make the user wait multiple minutes. And so this is where this comes in. And so we'll talk about how this works, but basically, like the short of it is that you take event data from the chain, you feed that into a database, and you transform it in some way so it's nice for the app to consume, and then voila, you can execute queries against this database, and all of your data shows up in the app really quickly. And so how does this actually work? So with this subgraph, I think it's important to actually go through how it works because it's cool, and I think that this type of system should be replicated elsewhere, and like, you know, the graph shouldn't be the only one that's doing this, and they're currently not. So where we have the chain is, we have our smart contract, cool. So we have our smart contract, it emits events because, you know, our DApp sent a transaction. Let's say that our DApp wants to vote. So our DApp sends a vote, our smart contract executes, and it sends an event. So this event gets fed into the graph node. So this is a service that's living on a server somewhere, and it's reading from a full node. And when it reads these events, it basically says, hey, this event, I know about this event. It is a DAOstack event that means a vote. And so I will go ahead and I will feed it to my mappings. And so these mappings are your transform functions. These allow you to write arbitrary code and transform this event data into a really nice user consumable schema. And so a great example of this is with minting reputation. That mint event from the reputation contract, what does that mean? It actually means you're modifying a member's reputation. There's no member contract. There's simply just a reputation token. And so in this mapping, we can take that mint and we can turn it into, hey, create a new member entity in the data store and give it this much reputation. So it's a really easy schema for your apps to use. It deals in semantics. So, you know, you're looking at DAOs, you're looking at members, proposals, votes, all the easy primitives you would think. But then in the contract layer, you're free to innovate and you're free to optimize without, you know, obstructing application developers. And so that's kind of the beauty that's happening here. And then lastly, we can execute queries from our DApp. So we can query, give me all members. We do a GraphQL query, hits the graph node, that hits the store, it gives you back the results. And then if we have more time here, I'll show you Alchemy loading, because I think it's a pretty beautiful thing, especially compared to what it used to be. It loads extremely quickly. And so now, to talk about the application layer, segue into Alchemy. Not necessarily. So this is the SDK that Alchemy uses. It's a TypeScript, aka like compiles a JavaScript library that sits client-side. It allows you to interact with, you know, proposals, DAOs, again, all of those basic primitives I had just talked about. And this is the main library that you want to use if you want to build an application using DAOstack. This is Alchemy, this is their DApp. It's really great. I recommend going to the website listed down here, checking it out. Without even logging into MetaMask, you can go ahead and view all the DAOs, view all the proposals. When you want to vote, it'll ask you, you know, use MetaMask, use Portis, use something else. And here's Genesis Alpha. This DAO has been around for a very long time. It's essentially the Commons DAO, the community DAO of DAOstack. And so essentially anyone is free to join because, you know, DAOstack envisions this being a huge DAO that represents all views and all thoughts of the stakeholders in this protocol. And so, you know, if you view yourself as a stakeholder or as someone that's just merely interested, go ahead and join the DAO and you can get some reputation and you can start placing votes and even making proposals to do cool things. Like, for instance, you know, an article, a book, a new open source project, fixing a bug. Like, the sky is the limit with proposals, which is great. And then now, to get to the emergent open source ecosystem. So this is the Dow Creator. This is a project that dOrg had worked on. Basically, what it allows you to do is it allows you to design a new DAO. And so, again, the link is down here. I'll go through the different pages. First off, we're going to go ahead and name our DAO. We give our DAO a DAO name, a token name, and then a token symbol. And again, this token doesn't necessarily have to be used, but if you want to assign it usefulness in the future, you can do so. So it's kind of just like, you know, when you're making your DAO, you might not think it's useful, but in the future, you might actually find some use for it. And then next, we're going to create, or rather add our schemes to the DAO. Here, it shows adding the scheme registrar to our DAO, and it has a critical voting configuration because we want to make sure we don't, you know, RIP ourselves. And then lastly, we're going to add our members. And so this is the initial distribution of our reputation and of our DAO's token. Yeah. Next, we have the Dow Explorer. This project's awesome because it basically allows you to get a macro level view of everything that's happening in the protocol, whereas with Alchemy, it's very tailored to a specific DAO. And so with Dow Explorer, it was one of the first projects that had been worked on by Bo and Shiv, who are sitting in the back, and they're smiling like crazy because this project's awesome. And then, yeah, it was funded through the Genesis DAO. And so they were some of the early members of the Genesis DAO. They made a proposal saying, hey, we want to build this. Genesis DAO said, yes, please build it. Here's its current state. It's looking at all of the proposals in all of the DAOs. Here's a bigger picture. We can actually sort and filter on different axes. And then, yeah, and the other cool part is that this right here is actually using another open source project, which I'll talk about next, which is Dow Components. And so Dow Components builds on top of the client library. It makes it a bit easier to be able to use the client library because it eliminates some of the boilerplate that comes into place when you're doing a lot of different asynchronous fetching from GraphQL and stuff like that. So basically, at the end of the day, it boils down to this code here. And I want to actually talk about this because I think it's simple. And any developer who is a little bit experienced with React can actually start to build a DAO application using this. And so let me go ahead and dive into this really quickly, since it looks like we're doing good on time. So first off, we connect to the protocol. So this is basically saying connect to Arc. Here's its configuration. There's default configurations as part of the library. You can connect to mainnet, testnet, Kovan, Rinkeby, etc. Actually, I think that's the entirety of the list. And then you now can go ahead and add your DAO component to the DOM. And so a thing to note here is that this seems clustered. Why would I want all these components right next to each other? Do I have to duplicate this all over my code? No. It doesn't use property passing. It uses React contexts. And so this can be added to the very root of your application. And then this can live wherever. This can live wherever. And then, yeah, the only time where things have to be essentially next to each other is when you consume things. And so we'll talk about this in a sec. So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, connect to this DAO at this address. Go ahead and give me a list of all of the members. And then for each member, go ahead and render this, this JSX. And so in this, we're going ahead and grab the DAO's data, the members' data. We pass it into a function, and we display the DAO's name, the member's name. I'm going to go ahead and stop going through this right now. I love this project because I really want to build an application with it, but, you know, time, but hopefully soon. And, yeah, feel free to check out the repo. Let me know if you have any questions. So next up is Bonding Curve DAO. So this one's really cool. First off, thank you, Gnosis. Gnosis was a sponsor of this project. They had given us a grant to be able to build this. Currently, one of our members, Thomas, is leading the project, and I think he's here today. And so if you go ahead and see Thomas, he says he's a part of dOrg, ask him about the Bonding Curve project, because this is really cool. Whole idea is to be able to build this Bonding Curve implementation. Currently, there is nothing hinging it on DAOstack, but we are treating DAOstack integration as a first-party citizen because that's what the Dutch X uses. Why do I bring up the Dutch X? The whole plan is for this economic primitive to be a continuous funding model for the Dutch X. And so, sorry, the DX DAO. And so the plan is, once we have this all completed, once we have the Alchemy integration completed, and it's completely usable, which it should be in about a month, maybe a month and a half, we'll go ahead and we'll make a proposal to the DX DAO. And we'll say, hey, we got this thing. Do you want to use this thing? And the DX DAO will go ahead and decide whether it wants to use the thing. And maybe magic happens, maybe they accept it, maybe all of a sudden the DX DAO is this self-funding organism that can, you know, fund all these cool projects and it becomes the biggest organization in the world. Or maybe they say nah. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I'm excited about this project. And again, thank you, Gnosis. And then next up is the Identity DAO. And so we're working on this project with eToro, aka Good Dollar. And they wanted a DAO to be able to manage a registry of identities, to curate it. And so this is an interesting concept because it's not necessarily a token-curated registry. It is a reputation-curated registry, where it's using a version of the holographic consensus protocol to either reward or penalize good or bad voters. And so the idea is that through this sort of economic and you know, power incentivizing game, you can actually get a large body of really good identity curators who are also being rewarded economically and, through voting power, through making good decisions on yes, this is a human, yes, this isn't, because we all know that humans can spot fake humans a lot better than, a graph analyzer that says this Twitter account has this many friends, therefore it's human. We've all seen those shit accounts, so we can spot them a lot better, is the hypothesis. And so anyway, here is an example of the application. We have our uploads with like a user image and a video, and then we also have a social identity verification post. And then we also have this concept of, let's say, an oracle, where we upload our private information, our OAuth with Facebook, our OAuth with Google, and then also our private state ID that we don't want to leak to the world. We go ahead and we upload that just to GoodDollar. And GoodDollar says, okay, we'll vet this for you, and we'll act as an oracle for the voters, saying, hey, the GoodDollar oracle says that this all checks out. They've Facebook OAuthed, and they have a valid Germany ID, let's say. And so the voters can go ahead and decide. And if they decide, then a generic call will add it to the registry. And so yeah, like it's a great example of how dynamic these DAOs can be. You want it to curate a registry, go ahead and make a generic action for that, which just comes out to be a JSON schema because it's using the same contract code. Yeah. And then lastly, more new ground ahead. There's so many cool things that everyone has been talking about, and the beauty of it is that it is a permissionless open ecosystem that is like funded and has funding opportunities, and the scope of the space is, I think, very unimaginable as we currently see it today. And I do think that the beauty of it is that this is an open work network, a open opportunity network. Just like Felipe was saying that his life had changed through joining the Genesis DAO and he got so many different opportunities and was able to fuel his passions, I believe the same thing is possible with all of these other DAOs that want to build cool things. And so if you're a developer, you want to build cool shit, find a DAO to pay for it is kind of the motto. Metacartel is a great example of this. Moloch, Genesis DAO, also dOrg is trying to get to this point, but we're still pretty small, but anyway. So yeah, some of the examples, you can build bots to be able to, like, let's say, send notifications, to be able to automatically post things to the DAO, et cetera, et cetera. You can build, graph analyzers to be able to say, this reputation holder is acting very strangely, or they vote in alignment with this other person that seems like collusion. Also, you can build, social networks on top of it, different reward protocols, and then also just different analytical tools, because again, we are dealing with organizations, we're dealing with economic entities, and so the better our analytics are, the better our planning is, the better we can actually facilitate these new forms of organization. So yeah, thanks a lot. We're going to have time for questions. And then lastly, I wanted to say, if you need any help, reach out to anybody. Anybody. The DAOstack community page, that actually redirects you to their Discord. And so go ahead and join there. This is dOrg's Discord. Go ahead and join there. Ask us any question under the sun. Here is Shiv's handle. I didn't tell her I was putting this up here, so feel free to spam her. And she's the open source advocate over at DAOstack. And myself, I'm just an enthusiast. Feel free to hit me up, and I'll try and answer your questions. So yeah, thank you. It looks like we still have some time, so are there any questions?
Can you tell me more about? You said it's not a token curator registry, but it's a reputation curator registry. Can you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and use the decentralization of our knowledge source and go ahead and feed this over to Ori, who also works on this project.
Yeah. So reputation, like Jordan said, is the non-transferable balance that members of a DAO have. So the idea is that, for example, for the identity DAO, it would be this large group of reputation holders who earn reputation through voting correctly on identity proposals. So basically, if you vote with the majority, you receive more reputation and also a part of a fee. And if you vote against the majority, like someone adds a proposal to get added to the registry, everyone thinks it's real, and you vote that it's not real, then you would get penalized. And so in that way, you use reputation as this non-transferable metric to kind of create a group of people that are good at creating this particular list. And that's different from a token curated registry because they're very not resilient against essentially plutocracy. Like you can buy a bunch of a token to vote for a single item to get accepted to the list. And reputation is not a financial asset. You can't purchase it. It has to be basically given to you by the DAO, which is the collection of other reputation holders.
Snaps all around.
Yes, in introduction, you told us that you were making money out of your DAO. Can you explain us how it works and what is your business model?
So yeah, we're freelancers, and so we essentially right now rely on clients to pay us for work. And so currently our clients, they're listed on our website. And also, since, again, like, tell me if I'm going over, but I think I have 5 minutes left. Oh, all right. Well, then I'll wrap it up. I was going to actually pull up like the website and everything, but we're paid through Good Dollar. They're working on the Identity DAO project, Gnosis, which gave us a grant for the BC DAO project, Bonding Curve project, and then also DAOstack. We're partnered with DAOstack because we like are hooked into their ecosystem. We build tooling in it, and we're like a the first party to decentralize the development of their stack. And so we're partnered with them, and so that's another source of revenue. And so yeah, through partnerships and client relations as freelancers. Kind of just like a software development shop. Yeah, any other questions? I think we're over, so I don't want to go too much over, but if there's any burning questions, feel free to ask. Yes? Who is supposed to run the graph node? So currently, the current implementation of graph node is centralized. And so currently DAOstack runs it. Other projects like Mullic, they have the graph run it because they'll go ahead and run yours for you. And then in the future, the idea is that there's a global network of people that are running these nodes. They're validating the ingestion and the responses of that data. And so if you are hitting one and it's spoofing you, it's giving you bad data, then it will validate with the other networks and you'll get like the correct answer, and there's an economic game. But yeah, that's the future version of the graph. Currently it's centralized. Sweet. All right, who's next? Thank you again for all of your questions.